Beyond the brick and mortar, 5 surprising realities of the Kirtland Temple dedication introduction. The ambition of the impoverished. There is a profound human impulse to build something that outlasts the self, to anchor the fleeting present to an eternal future. For the early Latter-day Saints in 1836, this impulse manifested in the construction of the Kirtland Temple. This was no project funded by a wealthy establishment. It was an undertaking born of great tribulation and forged in the crucible of extreme scarcity. As an historian, one cannot help but be moved by the sheer audacity of their sacrifice. These men and women did not merely donate from their surplus, they gave of their meager substance, as described in the dedicatory prayer, and offered up years of grueling physical labor to raise walls of stone when they often lacked the basic comforts of home. While we often view this temple as a quiet pioneer landmark, the original source documents reveal an event that was far from ordinary. Looking back at the 1836 dedication through an expert lens, we find 5 counterintuitive and supernatural realities that redefine the spiritual foundation of a people. 1. A house of best books. The temple as a university, one of the most striking, yet often overlooked aspects of the Kirtland Temple was its dual mandate as a sacred sanctuary and a rigorous center for intellectual development. To the modern observer, the idea of a temple doubling as a university might seem contradictory, but the dedicatory prayer, deepen, c. 109, makes it clear. Spiritual growth was viewed as inseparable from intellectual rigor. This was not a place of passive meditation. It was the home of the School of the Prophets, a practical application of the Lord's command to seek learning even by study and also by faith. The saints were instructed to seek out of the best books words of wisdom, transforming the temple into a house of learning where the mind and the spirit were disciplined in tandems. Organize yourselves, prepare every needful thing, and establish a house, even a house of prayer, a house of fasting, a house of faith, a house of learning, a house of glory, a house of order, a house of God. Deepen, c. 109, 8-2. The pillar of fire witnessed by outsiders. While religious experiences are frequently internal or private, the Kirtland Temple dedication was marked by physical manifestations, so intense they spilled into the public square. This was not a secret event. It was a localized, visible phenomenon that caught the attention of those who were not even participants in the faith. According to the official history of the church, History, 1838, 1856, Volume B1, observers outside the building reported hearing an unusual sound within and seeing a bright light like a pillar of fire resting upon the temple. Inside, the atmosphere was even more charged. Eliza R. Snow reflected on a joy inexpressible and a sense of divine presence realized by all, while others recorded a rushing mighty wind and the appearance of cloven tongues, like as of fire, resting upon the speakers. These accounts moved the dedication from a private devotional to a public, historical manifestation. 3. The imagery of the Savior on Easter Sunday. Perhaps the most significant event occurred 1 week after the public dedication, on April 3, 1836. The historical context here is vital. It was Easter Sunday. In a private vision, the prophet Joseph Smith and Oliver Cowdery witnessed the Lord standing upon the breastwork of the pulpit. The description of the Savior in Doctrine and Covenants, 110, is a masterpiece of what Elder Jarrett W. Gong calls complementary contrasts, sensory details that convey both overwhelming power and serene purity. The witnesses saw him standing upon a paved work of pure gold, in color like amber. To hear his voice was to hear the rushing of great waters, yet this power was matched by a countenance of pure snow. This sensory overwhelm, the heat of fire and the cold of snow, the brilliance of the sun and the roar of the deep, characterizes a being who is both the slain lamb and the living Jehovah. His eyes were as a flame of fire, the hair of his head was white like the pure snow, his countenance shone above the brightness of the sun, and his voice was as the sound of the rushing of great waters, even the voice of Jehovah. Deepen, c. 110, 3. 4. The transfer of global authority. More than a vision, the visitations in the Kirtland Temple were functional transfers of stewardship. Once the Lord had accepted the house, he authorized a series of ancient messengers to commit specific keys, the legal and spiritual right to direct the work of the gospel. This was the moment the church's mission shifted from a local movement to a global and multi-generational dispensation. Moses, he appeared to commit the keys of the gathering of Israel, specifically authorizing the work of collecting the righteous from the 4 parts of the earth and leading the 10 tribes from the land of the north. Elias, he committed the gospel of Abraham, ensuring that the blessings of the ancient covenant, the promise of eternal family and divine inheritance, could be conveyed to all generations. Elijah, he restored the sealing power, the authority to bind relationships across the veil of death. These were not just figures in a dream, they were the architects of the church's future, providing the legal framework for everything from global missionary work to modern temple service. 5. The turning of hearts, a radical legacy. The final and perhaps most culturally radical reality of the Kirtland events is the legacy of Elijah's visit. His mission was to turn the hearts of the fathers to the children and the children to the fathers. In an era where death was a constant, haunting presence, this sealing power offered a revolutionary promise that human relationships are not temporary arrangements that dissolve at the grave. By restoring these keys, the Kirtland dedication provided the foundation for modern family history and temple work. It suggested that the ultimate purpose of a house of God is to bind the human family together, ensuring the whole earth is not smitten with a curse of disconnection, but rather woven together through sacred covenants. Conclusion: a foundation that stands. The events of 1836 were never intended to be static history. As President Russell M. Nelson has observed, just as a physical building requires a reinforced foundation to survive the elements, the spiritual manifestations in Kirtland provided a spiritual foundation capable of withstanding the high winds and inevitable settling of life. The Kirtland Temple was a project of the impoverished that resulted in a wealth of authority that continues to influence millions today. As we reflect on the sacrifice of those early saints, we are left with a question that bridges the centuries. What are we building in our own lives today, perhaps against the backdrop of our own scarcity or great tribulation, that is worthy of such an eternal foundation?